All right, so what we wanted to start with this morning was because originally, for Mother's Day, we typically would like to do something pretty special, and we'd have a kids feature, and there'd be kids involved and saying thank you, all this cool kind of stuff that all these restrictions have just not made possible.
It's just got to do it a different way this year, yeah.
So what we wanted to do, it was to talk about our moms. And so what we've done is I've got a couple pictures up.
Are they up?
They're up. So Dimitri, if you can put those up.
Are they going to be side by side?
First one's mine.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then the second one, before we say which child is Patrick, I want to see if you guys can figure it out. Dimitri was wrong, just so you know.
Dimitri was wrong?
He messed that up. So that is me right there that you're seeing. That is me with my mom and my brother Pete. That is actually the last known picture of him without a beard. So shortly after that, the beard grew in. But yeah, that is my mom. There was some other pictures I really wanted to post of her, and so last night we were at their place, and there's one specifically. She is all permed up, and it is an awesome picture. The big glasses, and I've never seen my mom get physically violent. But as I tried to pull my phone out to take a picture, so that was not going to happen. But yeah, that is my mom. Obviously, I have two sisters in there as well, but I love that picture. So. Let's look at what Patrick looked like as a child.
I love this. I'm looking at, yeah. You could definitely see that's not too far removed from that 70s show. Yeah, that's my family. It's awesome. Look at those hairdos. I just keep thinking to myself, that's just so amazing. That was back in the day where I had hair.
Well, and I'm looking like your brother. If you've met Jason before, like Jason's face, if you were to put his current haircut on there, like it's not changed. The guy's identical.
I look at that picture and I'm like, wow, I can see Ryder and Jasper right there in that picture of me. But man, I just keep coming back to that's some seriously great hair we got going on there. Yeah, there's my mom and dad, and yeah, awesome. I was looking at that picture last night. Some awesome memories. But fantastic. Yep. All
right. So what we want to do is talk a little bit about our moms. And our hearts behind talking about our moms is that for those of you guys who are listening who are not moms, that if your kids had a platform, I think they would have a lot of the same things to say. Yeah. We are privileged because we have the platform and we can stand up here and we can chat and talk about our moms. But I think a lot of people who don't have this would want to say the same thing. So a couple questions we're going to go through is, first one is, what do you remember most? Like when you think back to being a young kid and kind of your perspective on your mom, what do you think of most?
I try to get specific on my memories, but man, one of the things I think overarching I always remember is lots of hugs and kisses and lots of laughter. Home was always a place where you always felt loved and cared for, and there was always lots of fun happening. And I just always remember, I just always knew that Mom was there. And she always had our backs. Yep. And she was always there watching out for, so that us as little guys didn't end up ending our life before we should, but she was always taking care of us. And I just always remember that. I just always, just her overall love, and kindness to us. How about yourself? What do you remember the most about your mom?
Well, I remember a lot of the trips. So we used to do a lot of trips. So I remember that. And some of those trips, though, I have more memories of fighting with my sister than I do necessarily my mom. But we did a lot of trips. One of the things that, as a family, at least us, it was really important when we worked together, you ate together. And so Sunday, roast dinners. After church, you came home and there was going to be roast with something. And that was every Sunday. And I still think she makes the best roast. I love it. So there's that was kind of moment. But from as a person, and I was trying to think too. My memory is not good. So people who know me know that my memory is not phenomenal. But when I have specific moments, a lot of them come back to just the way she treated people. And a lot of, as I think about who she is now, and watching her, the way she is so humble and so compassionate and caring towards people. Like she's the kind of person who. She has no kids living at home anymore. Obviously, we're all finally mature enough to not be at home. Yeah, finally, 37, but I'm out. But she is so busy caring for people, and so much of what she does just reminds me so much of Jesus. Like the way she cares for people, and even though it's hard and even though it's taxing, that's the way she raised us. And I think so much of that is she just gave of herself. Now when I think about some of the things that I expected of her, I'm like, wow, how did I not see that? Like, she did all my laundry. She made lunches. Like,
yeah, laundry was a magical thing at our house. I never really understood as a kid. When I was little, it was just, we always would have to put our laundry in the laundry hamper at the end of the hallway. And that was kind of like our job. We had to make sure it went in there. And then it was crazy. We put it in the laundry hamper. Then magically later that day, it would appear in our drawers. And I always was like, wow, that's crazy. I always was wondering how quickly it would get back to my drawer. I'm like, so there was like literally times where I would go check my drawer, like, an hour later and be like, well, is that shirt that I really like back there? Are those pants that I really like back there?
But as a kid, you don't. It's like
the amount of work
you understand sort of, but you don't appreciate it. Because I know some of my memories are me being mad because I had to work a lot. Like, I would have to help with dishes.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a little bit about
after Mom would make the whole meal and we'd eat the whole meal, I would have to help. Mm-hmm. And I would have to dry.
Yeah, you got the easy job. See, we've talked about this. The dryer.
No, it's not the easy job.
Dryers had the easy job.
Low expectations, kids. Understand this. You got to say.
Okay, so my brother would force me to wash. He was the older brother because he was smart. Because he knew that as I washed and I put the dishes in the dish rack, that he could just leave them, and they would air dry. And I didn't understand what was happening, but he had this system. He would kind of oversee my washing, making sure I did a good job and that kind of stuff. But then...
Because he's a good brother.
Right, because he's a good brother. But then he didn't actually do anything. He would just leave after I was done washing, and then he would come back a half hour later and put the dishes away when they were dry. So I didn't catch on to this until a little bit later. So then what I started developing was the 10-minute rule. About every 10 minutes, I would go back and I would take a cup and I would pour it all over the dishes so that they wouldn't dry off. So he actually had to do his job. Because I was like, if I have to wash, then you need to dry. It was
man.
Yeah, I'm sure Mom knew something was happening because I would keep getting up to, But, yeah.
So then what we were talking about as we were thinking about our moms, I feel like the older I get, the more appreciation I have. And a lot of that has to do with exactly what we're saying here. As a kid, you just didn't, I saw her doing laundry, I saw her cleaning, I saw her taking us places, but you don't understand what that takes. I don't even think as a kid you can. I think now as a parent, I try to get my kids to see it, but I certainly couldn't, and I don't think my kids can either. They'll appreciate it significantly more in about 20 years when they're watching their spouse care for their kids. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that's been so huge watching Josie. The things that I never saw were the things that happened after I was gone, or when I'm asleep.
When you went to bed,
right? You don't ever think what do Mom and Dad actually do after I go sleep? Wow, there was laundry, there was cleaning, but
dishes, yeah, endless.
But then there was also the whole weight of caring for this kid.
Yeah,
I think about the seasons in my life where I was never super rebellious, but rebellious enough to cause my parents concern.
Yeah.
And the weight that carries on, especially a mom. I don't know if it is. I don't know how you guys are, their dads, but I feel like I can box it out a little bit more. But with Jose, I just feel like she wears that solely on her heart. And she gives everything to these kids. But now looking back at my mom, I'm like, my mom did the same thing, but I never understood that as a kid. I would come home and we get into a fight, and all I could think about was, here's me being a victim of sadness again. I never understood how much they were protecting me by not allowing me to go to this place.
Right.
Or how much it hurt them to have to do what they did. You remember what you were saying in your prayer about Mom's rearing us, and we were thankful for that? Well, my mom delegated that, so my dad did a lot of the rearing. And then they would say stuff like, this hurts me more than it hurts you. And you'd go, you have not felt my behind. You clearly don't know. But now as a parent, any discipline you put in, it's hard. And then the other, after you've disciplined, then you sit there and spend the next 2 days going, did I make the right decision? Did I rear too much? Did I not rear enough? Should I have done this or should I have done that? And the weight of that is unreal. And I feel like moms wear that so deeply and so personally. So now being married and seeing what Jose does, man, it gives you such more of an appreciation for what moms are. And
it's difficult. We now live in a generation where it's very difficult to be in a single income family.
Oh,
and my mom was part of the generation that she made the decision to go to work and to help with that part of life.
Yep.
And a very difficult decision, but she made it to better the family. But that's also another sacrifice.
Yep.
knowing how close we were to our mom. That was one of the things that she was willing to do because it was better for everybody.
Yeah.
And again, just moms.
Yeah. So, if you haven't felt loved yet, moms, know that you're loved. And if your kids were not able to express it as well, they will appreciate it the older they get. And even now, like I don't know if I can still put into words how much that relationship with my mom means.
Oh, it's one of the things I love to see about, with my boys and Juanita is I love seeing how when we go to visit Grandma's house and then I see my boys act around Grandma and then I see how my boys act around Juanita. It's one of the things that I just kind of go, it kind of gives me a nice feeling to know that they're getting to experience the kind of love that I got when I was younger. They're getting that with her, and that's a really neat thing. Yeah. So I'm thankful for that. I know my life was better because of the way that my mom loved me, and I can tell that my boy's life is better because of how Juanita loves them. It's really cool.
So we could go on here for quite a while.
Yeah, we could.
What was your favorite recipe from your mom? Side note.
Favorite recipe from my...
What was your favorite, when you look as a kid, what did you look forward to the most? And I'll give you some time to think. So for me, it was my mom would make these dough patties with chicken in them. I know that doesn't sound that delicious, but shut up your face, it was amazing. My
dough
description
patties
just
with chicken
sucks.
in them?
Yes.
So like a pot pie?
No, but they're like little. Like she'd be dough with like flavor and chicken and stuff in it, and then she would scoop one out and then she'd fry it.
Isn't that like a pierogi?
I don't know. Just think about what your mom made. So mom, maybe you can chime in and out.
I think I can
She would do that with rice. That was my favorite. And rice with milk. Those two things. Between that, I was in my glory.
I don't know. I remember we would go to it. We would always have, I think it was payday. I don't remember as a kid, but I think payday. We would end up going to like your fish and chips in St. Thomas. That was like a big outing. And also there was for a while there, it was like I think on payday we would go to McDonald's. And this was back in the day when they used to have like all the slots for burgers. So you would walk in and everything was like being heated by these radiant heaters. You literally would be like 30 seconds ordering your food and going to sit down. It was just production like crazy. Yeah. But I remember those. Those are highlights. But my affinity for ice cream comes from my mom. Oh yeah, like that if there was like ice cream is like the bomb. It is like so important. Like literally I cannot keep it in my house because my mom could not keep it in her house. Because I mean, if you have ice cream, my mom would always have to leave the ice cream container even. So if you would, remember how you used to buy like a brick of ice cream and it would come in like cardboard, and you could buy Tupperware containers, so you would open up the cardboard and you would put that brick in that Tupperware container. So we would scoop it out, but my mom would hate having it so it was uneven in the container. And man, this is just like Juanita. This would probably drive Juanita nuts too. So I would intentionally go to the freezer and I would take out some scoops because I wanted to see if my mom would come and check on it and see if it was uneven, if it would be even again. And it would always be even. I think my mom was just waiting for me to go check the freezer so she could go eat more ice cream or something.
That's awesome. All right. So before we just talk about moms all day long, we're starting a new series, teaching series.
Yes.
On relationships and marriage.
Right.
And it was one that, it's funny. So last week, if you guys were listening, so I don't know if anybody listens to me, but if you were listening, I said we were launching Sermon on the Mount series this Sunday for sure, like guaranteed. Take it to the bank. And then this week, my phone literally lit up on texts about people concerned about other people's marriages, from people who were struggling in their marriage. And it just seemed like it was message after message after message. And so by about midweek, we kind of looked at each other and went, I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah, this week we'll be posting a 3-minute video to talk about the decision that we... we switch gears pretty quickly around here.
Whatever. So that's how we got to this. For those of you who are listening and like, that's not what you said at all. So we're doing that. But one of the things, so we want to start, just kind of give a little bit of a disclaimer for this. We can't stop loving as a culture.
No.
And it's been so fascinating to me because in my generation, for sure, marriage has become, I don't know if looked down upon by any stretch, but overall, it certainly isn't elevated to what it once was.
No.
And people are looking at the stats on marriage, and they're looking at divorce rates, and they're like, I'm not doing that. And you would think, knowing that divorce rates are high, knowing and seeing people get hurt by people that they love, we would be like, well, I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
And yet I haven't met anyone who's been able to be like, okay, I'm not going to have any relationships. I'm just not going to love people because there's just way too much risk involved.
Yeah, I'm not going to show any kindness. There's going to be no tight connections. Everything's going to be at a distance because I just don't want to go. It doesn't happen.
No.
It doesn't happen. You can be the biggest introvert, but you're going to have a relationship somewhere where you both can show love and kindness, and you can receive that as well.
So on the one side, I'm blown away that we still love, but on the other side, like there's so much about humanity that goes, we can't survive without it.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the most crucial parts of our lives, and when that doesn't happen, when we're not loved and we don't feel loved, we end up paying a lot for counseling.
Yeah. Well, even people that try to avoid the actual, the structure, marriage, certificate, they're still entering into a committed relationship, and they've been there for 25 years. They have no intention of anybody else. They didn't want that because they were hoping to avoid the statistic of the divorce, even though they want the relationship and they want to be in that loving connection with somebody. Yeah. So
as we go into this series, one of the things that I want to do too is, because some of you guys are listening, you're not married, like Trevor.
Yeah.
And he's not married just because he doesn't, I guess, engagement ring stores are closed. I'm not really sure. Like exactly.
No. Nobody's going to push me too fast. My own time.
Did she say no? Do you think that's what happened?
If I were to say yes now, would you like?
Okay. So if you're not married and you're like, I don't like, what am I supposed to listen to for the next couple of weeks? One of the things that we really believe and talk about is that most of the issues facing married couples. So when we talk about relationships, most of the stuff me and Josie fight with, I also struggle with at work. I also struggle with in relationships at home. Most of the relational issues that we have, there's very few that we're like, at my home I struggle with this, but in all my other relationships, none of this affects.
Yeah, we would title these pre-existing conditions.
Right. You struggled with this long. So if you're single and you're like, this is going to be as much about relationships. And so even when we're talking about marriage, most of the issues we have in marriage, we're going to have on other issues. And so that's why we talked about the series being marriage and relationships. We do want to speak to marriages. Because in marriage, and this is where, again, these statistics, they should at least incite some fascination into us. How is it, Patrick, that you can choose one person? Like it's not like all the other girls would have said yes, but at the end of the day, you choose one person. Wow. How do we struggle so much? Well, I don't know.
That's good. I like
that. That's what I always say when Josie started dating me. I hung on for dear life because I was like, I don't know if anybody else ever will, right? So, but how is it that we struggle so much? But even with the people that we choose to love, even with friends, even with those that we choose to surround us with, and I think that should give us pause to go, okay, there's some things that we need to understand about ourselves and just the relational dynamics, because even the ones that we want to love, we struggle with.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to kind of give us a bit of a backdrop as to why we're doing this series, what we want to accomplish with it. And today we wanted to start with sacrificial love. And the reason we want to start with that is because we were talking this week about, and maybe you guys can answer this question differently, but we were asking the question, what is it about moms that make everybody love their mom? Like, I'm not saying everybody loves their mom. I'm sure there's people out there going, well, I don't love my mom. I'm the exception. But for the majority, you hear interviews, whether it's celebrities, athletes, you hear gangsters, whatever that is.
It doesn't matter.
It's my mama.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there is something unique about what moms do in our lives. And so I asked you the question, what is that?
Yeah, and as we were talking, we kept coming back to this understanding that, especially from our perspective, watching Juanita go through the process of having a baby, there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice right from the get-go. Like, there's an understanding that this is going to interrupt career. This is going to change you physically. This is going to affect you mentally and emotionally. This is going to require of you to give yourself up so that this baby can have everything that it needs. There was all sorts of decisions that way. When you talk about first having a baby, the baby needs to feed. Well, if you're not, in the case of us, Juanita was trying to be careful right after having a baby. She's 4'11" and 3/4.
Is she really that?
No.
Really?
I think she's 5 foot. She's probably gonna message me right now.
We'll just say she's 6 feet.
Yeah, she's 6 feet. But I mean, she was trying to work on her physicality afterwards to be healthy. But in order to have enough milk to be able to feed the baby, she had to eat more, and she had to delay herself getting back to her weight. Yep. And there's always those stresses in society, and we would talk about just wanting to be healthy, but there's a sacrifice. Yep. There's a sacrifice that takes place, and I think that's I think as a baby, the connection that you have with your mom, I don't understand all that goes into it, but you definitely understand that there's a sacrifice happening, and this person is taking care of you on this next level. Yeah. And I think that just resonates with that. It stays with us. It's almost like it's written into us that we understand that kind of love. And I think that we remember that moving forward. So
what we kind of concluded was this idea that moms sacrifice an incredible amount. And again, I'm looking at Jose and what she does for the kids. Like, they're sacrificing in the hope that their love will help this boy or girl become the person that God created them to be. And there's a huge sacrifice in that. But then we look beyond just that. I mean, when you guys think about who it is that really, when you look back at your past, who's inspired me the most? Who are those special, who's that teacher that stands out, or that coach that stands out? And when you start going, okay, well, why did that person stand out so much to me? My guess is that the word sacrifice is going to come in there, because they sacrificed their time to help you understand something you didn't, or to help you develop in some way, or to push you along, or to whatever that is. And it's those people that give it more than they had to that stand out. Yeah. Because I had some teachers who gave less than they had to, but you don't even remember them. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't even be able to remember their names, but I can tell you a few teachers, and I can remember their names, and I remember them very detailed because they stood out to me. They cared more. And so with that, we want to start today with that. And we want to go into a passage. So we're going to go into Ephesians 5. And so if you're familiar with Scripture, this is a passage that the church has not necessarily done well in. I think maybe in
that's being fair, yeah.
I think in history, when you look at a lot of the abuses in marriage, especially within people of faith, yeah. This would have been a passage that you could utilize to give yourself power within a marriage, yeah. Where you could, especially as a male, have dominance. And so if for some of you guys listening, this passage may have some triggers where you kind of go, man, I don't like this passage. Yeah. And so as we read through it, what we want to ask is just, if you, as soon as you heard Ephesians 5, if you're already like, oh, are you kidding me right now? This is where you're starting this series? If you're getting that feeling, just give us a second, because what we really believe is that if this passage is properly understood, this forms one of the most key elements into every relationship you're going to have, and being able to actually get the most out of the life and the relationships that you have. And so that's where we're going to start. Ephesians 5, we're going to read from verse 21. So verse 21 says this: submit. And as soon as we get to submit, that's the word people hate. Yep.
What did he say? Submit.
What? I'm out. I'm finding me a new church.
Yeah, this isn't judo or wrestling. Submit. No, this is my life. What?
So just hold on. Stand by. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And so before he gets into the wives and husbands piece, there's this little verse, there's a small little phrase. He says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Our view on humanity in general and the value of humans is something that we often don't think about.
Yeah, I think oftentimes, and I think it's part of our nature. I don't know if that's the right word to say it, but I'm usually concerned about myself. Yep. I'm usually driven by my own self-ego, my own self, my own world, my own perspective, my own what is this for me? How can I get the best out of this for me? And the idea of placing myself underneath someone else is almost the idea of me not getting my way. Right. And I think we're starting out here in this discussion, and the scriptures, the Bible is plainly telling to us that there is an overarching view that we need to have in our relationships. Right. And it's to start out where we're supposed to esteem someone else more than ourselves. We're supposed to put other people before ourselves in a place where it's not just about me. I am considering the person next to me.
Right.
You see this all throughout Scripture. We're commanded to love our neighbor. We're commanded to take care of one another. We're like, it's ordered. You need to do these things. And here we have this passage which says, submit to one another. Submit. Set aside yourself for the purpose of someone else.
And again, this isn't unique to marriage. This isn't just saying, okay, if you've been married. So this is saying just in general, the way you view other humans, the way you view your life, there's a value on others.
Right.
And so when throughout this constant thing, he constantly goes back to Christ. So for those of you guys who are followers of Jesus, or your worldview is that God exists, and your worldview is that God created humans, the way you view another person has to change.
Right.
So the way I would view Patrick isn't just as another human, but it's actually as a brother.
Right.
In the sense that we are brothers and sisters under God. We are family, that you are loved by God, that you are created by God. But what ends up happening is when we get into moments where we don't like somebody, or we especially when we get to hate, our perspective on them changes.
Yeah, we make every attempt we can to dehumanize their actions and to make them appear less than the creation that God has made them to be.
Right, because hatred really, I would argue, is against what we actually want to do.
Right.
And so in our brains, we have to go, okay, so I'm treating this person as less than human, and I have to find a way, and I think that's why things like racism and that exist. You have to find a reason, even if it's a stupid reason. And color of skin is a ridiculous reason to hate somebody. But we have to find something that in our brain justifies why we would treat somebody poorly. And so in this passage, right, we got to go, okay, what is it, Patrick? I mean, what would a person have to do before you could dehumanize them? What's that standard? And so when it comes to marriage, what does that other person have to do before I have the right to dehumanize them? But when you see a lot of divorces and you see the direction that marriages go, there's a dehumanizing process. That person's just evil. That person's just vile. That person, all these things. And Paul says, hold on. Not just in marriage, but everywhere else. I need you to submit to one another, not just because it's going to be easy, not just because they're perfect, not just because it's the best for you, but because out of reverence for Christ, because of your love for Jesus, because of your care and your honor. If you're going to prove that you actually want to follow Jesus, the way you treat others is your primary way of proving that.
Right.
So that gives us a foundation that we really need to understand and really buy into, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
This is not an easy one, but
yeah. Do you remember fighting with your brother?
No, he was 4 years older than me, so those fights were pretty quick.
So he would get you down, and he'd be like, "Give up, say uncle," all that kind of stuff. I didn't like to do that. Yeah. To say I give up and I quit, man. I remember just give in, just give in. No, this can be a difficult thing in our humanity to do. So I want to acknowledge that it can be hard to say I submit.
Sure it is.
Yeah.
Because we do have those standards, because people do hurt us, because people do betray us, but again, let's set a standard up front. So my worldview says that people matter. Right,
people matter, and out of reverence for my relationship and understanding of Jesus,
yes, I'm
going to treat them a very specific way.
All right, so then verse 22 goes, wives, and so I want to just stop at the wives thing, and it's something Andy Stanley said years ago that has always stuck with me. One of the issues with this passage is that husbands read this part. Because now what a husband does is he reads that and he goes, okay, well, this is what my wife's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So we use it to enforce.
Listen here now. Listen here. This is for you.
Josie, listen. Right? So we do this, but he says what he always does when he did premarital counseling is when he read this part, he said wives, and then he tell the husband, just ignore this part.
Yeah.
Because it's not for you. You can't use this to force something on someone. He's just giving some, okay, so a wife, this is what this is going to look like. So let me read this.
And in the context of out of reverence for Christ, as Christ is speaking to you, if he was here in this room having a conversation with you and your husband wasn't here, this is what he would say to you.
Right. So, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body for which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And all the good feminists that are listening are going, wow, how did we get back to the 50s? What are you guys doing?
50s, they're going to go all the way back to 1800s. I can just see some of these conversations. Screaming.
So this is where I need you guys to just hold on just a second, okay? Just bear with me. because he continues. And so then he goes, all right, so husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. So let's talk about this a little bit, and let's create a picture here.
So initially, we started out with the overarching context umbrella statement that we're supposed to submit one to the other.
Right.
Then Paul goes into a little bit more detail of what this actually looks like inside the relationship, and how it is for her and how it is for him, if we were to say it that way, for the two people involved here. And he goes on to say, this is a mutual submission of each other to each other for the purpose of allowing the person that you're together with to become the best version of themselves as they walk their journey of faith out and as they live out their life in Christ.
Right.
So this isn't designed to be like, oh, I'm going to be set up on a pedestal here and I'm going to have my kingdom to rule over and everybody's going to, that's not what he's saying at all. That's a complete misunderstanding of this passage. Yep. If that's the interpretation that you've been taught a very poor interpretation. Right. He is saying that the two people are supposed to submit to each other for the purpose of benefiting or being beneficial to the union that's happened together.
Okay, so let's take this outside of marriage real quick. Let's go back to other relationships. So there's basically a concept that you're saying.
Right.
And that is, so you give your life to help others become the best version of themselves.
Right.
So what happens, think about where you work. Think about what kind of a impact it would have if you made it your goal to help everybody that you work with become the best versions of themselves. Think about what impact if your boss, instead of just saying, thou shalt work for me because I pay thou bills, said, I'm going to try to give you everything so that you can find joy in this job, so you can find fulfillment, so that you can become the best possible human. What would that do to the culture at your workplace? When we think about another example, you think about sports, there are a lot of individual athletes that are phenomenal, but they don't win championships.
Yeah. Why? Right?
You look at guys like, I know you're going to go to Tom Brady, so I'm going to cut in because we're all sick of hearing about Tom. No, just kidding. Sidney Crosby. So I'm going to go hockey here because I love my Crosby.
I think hockey's a great analogy here.
So one of the things about guys like Sidney Crosby is that he not only is an incredible player, but he makes everybody around him better. Mm-hmm. So his stats, I mean, if he was just going for goals, and if that's all he wanted to do, well, then maybe he'd have the most goals. Right. And I think Connor McDavid, if you follow sports, he's had this wrestle a little bit because he's by far one of the best players of the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Fast, incredible, but by himself, he cannot win these games. So you have to find yourself as a superstar player. You have to go, okay, well, how can I elevate everyone else's games? Because otherwise, I get a good reputation. It looks good on me, but we don't win any championships.
Yeah, it's the team, and if I remember back, I don't know if anybody can remember back with me, but I go all the way back to like the '93 Leafs. And I remember their fourth checking line, the Peter Zezel line. And I remember that these guys would come on and they would check against the number one line of the other teams. And they would sacrifice themselves in their checking and their approach and their energy. They wouldn't be the line that would score the goals, but they would burn out that other team's top line by how they played defense and how they worked them over. You think about the defender who's willing to slide down in front of a puck. And what does that do? Well, that increases, that helps the goals against average of the goalie behind him. Yep. If you look at the ones that are constantly getting their sticks down to do deflections, if you put all those stats in there, all of a sudden the goalie who may have been a great goalie to begin with, now he's off the charts. Well, why? Because his teammates are sacrificing themselves and their stats to make him look better. I don't know about you, but I don't think having a 90-mile-an-hour puck drilled into my side makes me a better hockey player. Like I don't think the next time I go down the ice to do something magical with the puck, not that I can, but if that's the case, I don't think that would give me a better chance to score. Right. But it made my goalie better. Right. And if they don't score, then the team goes further. So I'm sacrificing myself to the betterment of my team.
So this is where you begin to go. So in marriage, again, we get this in sports, we get it in work, but marriage is supposed to be a lot of that same concept. But we end up looking in marriage, and when we talk about these relationships, we rarely think in terms like this. You don't go into your marriage and think, well, how can I make my wife the best version of herself? We go into marriage because when you're dating, when you see her, you get little fuzzies in your stomach and you get really excited and you think, well, this is going to be amazing. I get to, make out with her. We get to hold hands. And you think, but they're all things that benefit you.
Yeah.
These are things that benefit me. And so we end up going into marriage and sometimes we don't lose that. And we just stay in that place where really what we end up being is we end up being cohabitating individuals.
Yeah.
Who are both trying to get their needs met through the other person. So I don't want to be lonely, so I want to have a wife. I also think it's expensive to live by myself, so I need somebody else to live with. And so I want my needs met. And you see parents do this with kids too. You have kids so that your own needs can get met. And I'm not saying all of those are going to end in divorce. I'm not going to say all those are negative, but you're not going to get the full effect of what marriage was supposed to be, because what marriage was supposed to be is that same idea. So if you think about it this way, so we already have to submit to one another anyway. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you have to submit. That is literally the call. What is the greatest command again? To make the most out of your life? Live your best life now?
Well, Jesus broke it down into two, and he said you're supposed to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then you're supposed to love your neighbor as you love yourself.
So your neighbor would come ahead of yourself?
Yeah.
So we already have this. So no matter which way you go, you can't get away from this.
No. It is again an overarching principle that is supposed to be applied to every relationship and every connection that we have, no matter where we are. So if it's in the marriage relationship, it has to be there. If it's in the workplace, it has to be there. If it's at school, it has to be there. We're constantly called to put ourselves into this place so that we can, as a community, as a greater whole, become better together.
Right. So when you go into marriage, and so I just think, so people read this and they go, wives, submit to your husbands. You go, forget it, I'm not doing it. And you have that right.
Yep.
You don't have to.
Yep.
But what would it look like? Just hear me out. So that then, wives, you submit to your husband and you begin to battle for him. You begin to honor him. You try your best. I want to allow my husband to be everything that he was created to be. And you think, but I've got nothing now in return. Like that's just, I've emptied myself. My life is just about. But then you go to the husband and it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Well, the way Christ loved the church is with everything. I mean, there's nothing held back. So now you have your partner living his entire life to try to lift you up.
Yeah.
And what you end up doing now is you create a culture in your marriage where you eliminate fear and shame and anxiety, all these things, because you remember when we made our vows?
Yeah.
He said, it doesn't matter whether I go poor or get fat or get sick or
I noticed how you said that fat part. Yes, I understand.
Well, crispy.
Yeah.
Cream.
Yeah. But it's true, though. We make those vows to reinforce a principle that says, I'm with you no matter what.
And so then you get into this relationship and you go out to work, but even if you fail, you're coming home and that lady is going to love you regardless. That gives you an incredible amount of confidence and drive in life that nothing else can give you. I think about it in my own life. So Josie's been awesome. And I'm very, very blessed. So one of the things, so when we got married, I was going to be a cop and we were going to live really well. And I was going to probably become like a chief of a big city, SWAT, those were my dreams. But anyways. You can clearly tell that did not work out.
In my head, I'm thinking Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but go ahead.
Yeah. And if you are thinking that, I'm Jake, he's Charles. That we already decided that. But anyways, Josie found out that her husband actually, through time, wanted to become pastor. And when I came back here, this church was in a rough spot, and there was a good chance. I was young. There was a very good chance I was going to get hurt, and it was very, very stressful. But that never held her back from supporting. And so when days here are hard and when days here are stressful, I love going home because I can go home and at least there I know there's one person that is going to fully support, fully love, and fully care for me, even though she knows everything. She knows all my crap. She knows all my garbage. She has my back in a way that you don't have anything else. With firefighting, with all those things. So now when I look at my life and everything I've been able to pursue and accomplish, I wonder how many of those things I would have quit because I was afraid, because I wasn't sure if I could do it, all those things. And there was just, like last year, I took a couple months off from the fire department because I was like, I don't know, I spent a lot of time there and I don't know if that's, and during those months, Josie could have said, it's about stinking time you're just at home. It's about time you do more stuff around here. But she knew that a part of the way I'm wired and a part of what I love. So they sent me back. They said, no, you need to go back. And so my hope, I'm not going to speak for her because I've tried to be that kind of husband. But I'm not going to be like, and I'm awesome too. I am so awesome. But I in my own life, I have seen this where I have seen her submit to me. And it has made me so much of a better person and enjoy my marriage so much. And the more I see her support me, the more I'm like, every dream you have, I want to be able to allow you to accomplish. And what this really does is it creates a culture of community in your marriage instead of two isolated people trying to use the other person to accomplish their gain.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that we had talked about as we were discussing some of this is that inside of relationships, there's not just, what people would define as the traditional, husband-wife relationship where the husband goes off to work and the wife stays home with the kids. If your wife is supposed to be a doctor, then what are you doing having her stay at home and not being a doctor? You're not helping her to be everything that she is supposed to be and what she was made to be. She is supposed to be a doctor. If she's supposed to be the policeman, then what are you doing trying to confine her to something that she's not? You're not upholding your end of what the passage says here where literally men are commanded to behave towards their wife as Christ behaved towards the church and gave his life for. And not only gave his life for it, then he empowered the church with the Holy Spirit and the giftings to become everything that the church was supposed to be. That's literally what the man has been called to do. Give up yourself for her.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing to consider. And as we speak up here on stage, you hear a lot of what our dreams are as men and what our roles are. But we fully recognize that the body, the community, men and women, we understand that there are giftings and talents that man, there are things that my wife does that I just can't do.
Right.
I look at her in different aspects of her life and how she talks and how she communicates with people and just how people's walls come down around her just so easily. And she is gifted in so many different ways. I don't want her not to enjoy those things that God has made her to be. Right. And I think that's an important thing. It's got to be a mutual consideration of how God made the person you're with. And if you're in a relationship, that's what it should be.
So that's where we're going to end off week 1. And as this goes on, I'll just read the rest of the passage here. He says, in the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one has ever hated their body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother, be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. And that idea of one flesh, I know we were going to end on this, but just real short. When you begin to understand what Paul is saying here, you begin to understand that more. That one flesh, that part of my identity is wrapped up in trying to allow you to become everything you were created to be. But it doesn't just stop there. Like I think about the environment we try to create here in the church, among staff, among volunteers, among the whole congregation of, you're not alone. And we don't want to hold you down so we feel better. Who can we lift up? Because we need everyone. Again, this goes back to the very first verse. Submit to each other because everybody has a role to play.
Yeah.
Everybody has a part to play. And if everybody doesn't play their part, it actually hurts. It hurts the community. But that concept of one flesh, that's why it's so beautiful. And that's why marriage, done well, can be the most profound relationship you have. And then he goes on, he says, this is a profound mystery, but I'm actually talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. And so when we begin to see this passage, really what we're trying to say is that love is actually going to change people. Yep. Sacrificial love. And in marriage, I think often we end up going to a place where I'm going to change that person by forcing, by nagging, by manipulation, by withholding, all these other things. And the view here is just, if you really want a good marriage, the best thing you're going to need to do is to love on that person with everything. And as you love them, they're going to change and they're going to develop. And even if they're not, this is still the better way to choose.
Oh, yeah, much better way by far.
All right, so with that, we'll jump into week 2 next week. Obviously, for you guys today, I hope you guys enjoy Mother's Day. I hope you celebrate with your family. For those of you guys struggling in your marriages and your relationships, hang on. Reach out don't give up. If you can get through what you're battling through, it'll be strength for you on the other side. For those of you guys who have gone through divorce, there is healing. There is healing to go back to love, because love can really hurt.
Yeah.
And you end up divorced and you end up in this pain. I'm never going to love again, but that's no way to live. For those of you guys who are looking for someone and you're single, hang on, but continue to dive into relationships. One of the things that we want to do with this series, we are going to start posting tomorrow a few links to different series on Right Now Media. If you do not have access to Right Now Media, message me, Patrick, Judy, anybody on the staff, because there are a ton of amazing series. There are series for those of you guys who have gone through divorce. There are series for those of you guys who are single, for those of you guys who are married, different elements. So we're just gonna post a bunch and encourage you guys to watch one. Pick one.
Yeah, we're not saying watch them all. What we're saying is let's do some work on who we are,
right,
and what we would like our relationships to be in whatever area that is, workplace, single, married, whatever that is. Take some time to put some time and effort into having your perspective challenged, right. And then we want to hear from you. If you send us an email, send us a messenger, post about what you've watched, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, what you agreed, what you disagreed with, how it's impacted you,
right.
And we would appreciate that.
So with that, we'll close in prayer, and then we're going to jump into some worship. Have a great day. See you soon. Let's pray. Father God, thank you so much for this morning. Thank you for the example of love. God, when Paul writes that we're supposed to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, it's not out of doing something for each other that you haven't done for us. And watching the way Jesus lived here, and watching the way he submitted himself to each other and to us, and gave up his life so that we can live in the grace and the hope and the mercy that we currently have. God, thank you for doing that. Jesus, thank you for modeling that for us. And so Holy Spirit, I just ask this morning that you soften our hearts towards each other. God, I pray that you'll break down the walls and the pains that so often hinder our relationships, and then give us insight into what this looks like for ours. And for wives, for husbands, help us to learn to love each other better. In our relationships at our workplaces, with friends, help us to learn to model and to live love better. So Father, we're thankful for your love, for your example. We're thankful for this church, for these people. We love you. Amen.